Alright, hello everyone, Simon here, and we are in Assassin's Creed Liberation, and we are gonna look at architecture in this video. We might just go through all the architecture in one video, because there's not that many landmarks in this game. But there are, like New Orleans is rebuilt here fairly well, like most of the things are here. Then we go to the database and locations, and New Orleans. Let's start with what we see in front of us here, which is the St. Louis Cathedral. Oh, it doesn't have anything in the game. The game just gives you a picture and a name. It doesn't actually gives you anything. Okay, well, it doesn't actually give you any description of it. All right, Saint Louis Cathedral. Did I spell that right? So we're looking for the one in New Orleans. Officially, Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, Louisiana, United States. Alright, so it looks like that. Although... curious. I mean, the spires are not in the game. Is that the same one as we're looking at? Not really, is it? Hold on. So the one in the game looks like that. There's a triangle bit, there's 3 towers. But the one in real life looks like that. It's not quite the same, is it? Let me read about it. There is history. Oh, here we go. St. Louis in 1794, the year before it became a cathedral. Okay, so it's different. Every single picture is different from what we see today. I think the one in the game should look like this. But they added the central tower, I guess, to make it look more like what we have today. But the central tower is not there. Alright, let's see. The Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, also called St. Louis Cathedral, is the seat of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New Orleans, and among the oldest cathedrals in the United States. The first church on the site was built in 1718, the third built in 1789. So we're in 1777, which means it might be the second church. It was raised to cathedral rank in 1793. The cathedral was expanded and largely rebuilt in 1850, with little of the 1789 structure remaining. Alright, so whatever it is in real life today is nothing like what it was back in the time of the game. St. Louis Cathedral is in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana, USA, on the place John Paul II, a promenaded section of Chartres Street that stretches 1 block between St. Peter's Street on the upriver. We know where it is. We don't need to. Never mind. It's here, alright? It's right here. It is right there. We don't need to get a description of the street address of it. It is one of the few Roman Catholic churches in the United States that fronts a major public square. Okay, one of the few Roman Catholic churches in the United States that fronts a major public square. So if my knowledge of religion is correct, the United States is not Catholic for the most part. So it's one of the few Catholic cathedrals that is basically in a major public space. Because, New Orleans was French and then Spanish, so it was Catholic. History. The 3 Roman Catholic churches have stood on the site since 1718. The first was a crude wooden structure in the early days of the colony. Construction of a larger brick and timber church was begun in 1725 and was completed in 1727. So I believe the thing we see in game should be the brick and timber structure. So there was a crude church at the start, and then a larger brick and timber one was built soon after. I mean, it's timber, and I believe there's brick down here. Not sure how accurate this is though. So it's mostly a timber church. I don't know if it's full size or if it's the right size or what. But it's fairly substantial, as you can see. Along with numerous other buildings, the church was destroyed in the Great New Orleans Fire in 1788. On Good Friday, March the 21st, 1788, the cornerstone of a new church was laid in 1789 and the building was completed in 1794. In 1793, St. Louis Church was elevated to cathedral rank as the see of the Diocese of New Orleans, making it one of the oldest cathedrals in the United States in 1819. The central tower with the clock and bell was added. Oh, in 1819, a central tower with the clock bell was added. So what we see in the game is actually not like the one in real life at all. First of all, it was burned down in the fire, so we don't know what it is like anymore. But there was no central tower until 1819. It doesn't really say anything else about the old church, so there's not much for us to read, except it was kind of reconstructed in 1850 or so. Yeah, in 1850 the central tower collapsed and then replaced. So it's actually not anything like the current church, which is there. Bombing visits of Pope's Hurricane Katrina Cemetery. St. Louis Cemetery is known as the burial place of voodoo priestess Marie Laveau, and her tomb brings hundreds of pilgrims every year. But she's a voodoo priestess. That's the strangest thing. A voodoo priestess is buried in the St. Louis Cemetery, and there's pilgrims to visit a voodoo priestess buried next to a church. The cemetery is... Did she convert? She must have converted somehow. Otherwise they wouldn't have buried her in a church. Creole practitioner of voodoo. Legendary rites. Wait a minute. Was she accepted by the Catholics? The marriage certificate preserved in St. Louis Cathedral. The wedding mass was performed by Father Antonio. Alright. That is the strangest thing. Apparently her voodoo was accepted by the church. Okay, well, I mean, if you say so. I don't understand. The cemetery is also the burial place of various prominent New Orleans residents, including a bunch of names. Although not buried in a cemetery, there is a copper nameplate for Madame Marie Delphine Lalaurie in Alley 4. Actor Nicolas Cage purchased an empty tomb here to be used as his final resting place. Alright, eventually Nick Cage is also going to be buried here. And then hauntings and other things. So there's no image of the old church for us to compare with, which is a bit of a shame, unless there's stuff in the Wikimedia comments. What do we have in the comments? Mostly photos of the existing church. Yeah, no. Oh wait, what's this? Jackson Square. Let me just open that up. Let me look for historic images. That's 1875, so that's not correct neither. So this is 1875, so that's the modern church. That's also the modern church. Alright, that's not useful. So, not too much information about the building as it is in the game. But I guess we learned that it's a Catholic church. And one of the few major Catholic churches in the United States, in the sense that it fronts a major public square. There's also meant to be a cemetery behind it, but it's not in the game. I don't know if the cemetery at the back of town counts as the same cemetery or if it's a different one. Hold on, let me just go to the map, because this thing keeps opening up. Get closer. So there's a cemetery there. In the game, there's another cemetery further back. Hold on, Congo Square, Louis Armstrong Park. This is a park. Okay, so maybe, I don't know, but there should be a cemetery here. It's actually quite small, this cemetery. Wait a minute, this cemetery is tiny. Is that a cemetery or is that something else? I don't really know what to say. But there should be a... I mean, in the game, there's a cemetery back here, which is a different thing, and which does not exist in the game, I don't think. I mean, it doesn't exist in real life, I don't think. Where am I going? Let me just quickly go to the cemetery and see if we can find Nick Cave's plot. Not Nick Cave, Nicolas Cage. The other Nick. This is a different cemetery, right? Oh, actually, the street signs. What does that say? Those are shop signs. That's pork. And that's a, what is that? I don't know what that is. I mean, there's a cemetery here, but there's a different one, right? Are there any famous or conspicuous tombs? No, nothing conspicuous. Nothing we can read. What is this guy doing here? Nothing conspicuous. Nope, never mind. Alright, well, we can't identify anything here. Well, there is a graveyard, whatever that means. Alright, let's continue with the other landmarks. What do we have to look at? Database, locations, New Orleans, the Ursuline Convent. I don't think we ever came here in the game. Like, there was never a mission that took place here, was there? Let me Wikipedia this. URS what? URSU Ursuline Convent, New Orleans. No, I want the crap. Ursuline Convent, New Orleans, 1734. Old Ursuline Convent, New Orleans. Curious. There's a series of them. Let me go to them in the game first of all, if I can find it. It's a fairly distinctive building, I believe. It was never a part of the game, was it? Ursuline Convent is this, I believe. Let me run over there. They put the building in the game, but it's not really involved in any of the missions. And it's possible that there's more history or more reliable images of this place. Alright, so where are we? Not this one. Further along. Further along here, I believe. Alright, it's this thing. It is behind the wall though. Can we climb up somewhere to look at it? Let me climb on top of this building so we can get a better view of the convent. There's trees in the way. Anyway, it's there. So the old Ursuline Convent in New Orleans. A series of historic Ursuline convents. The first building for the Ursuline nuns in New Orleans was designed by Ignace Francois Breton in 1727 when the nuns arrived in New Orleans. Michael Zering was the builder, planning collecting material, and construction took years. Existing drawings show the building in 1733, although it was not officially finished until the following year. So there are diagrams of the 1733 building, so they drew pictures of it. That's good. The historic second building, oh never mind, this is not the there's a second building pretty soon afterwards. The 1745 plans for a new building of brick and protected columbage. Columbage? What is this? A mixture of clay and grass or other fibrous substances used as the infill between the timbers of half-timbered buildings. So basically it's rammed earth. It's a rammed earth building. It's clay. Packing in between timber. Material was commonly used by 18th century French colonial settlers in the historical New France region of the United States. Because it's local material, right? You just kind of take the clay and ram it in between the timber for structure. The contractor was Claude Joseph. I don't know if we care about. Oh, it's the contractor of public works for the king. His wife, Marie Payen de Noyen, was Bienven's sister. This is like a soap opera. I don't want to know about the people. This structure was completed in 1751. It's likely that Alexandre de Batz also took part in the design because several payments were listed to him for work on the new building. So there's obviously a lot of records kept for the money and the design of this thing and the materials. The new building was laid out adjacent to the site of the older structure, and some materials from the older building used in the construction of the newer one, including the staircase that can still be seen in the main entrance hallway. Really? So, laid out adjacent to the site of the older structure. Was the older one demolished or was it kept? It's not here, right? Hold on, let me just look at this. Oh, I think the older structure is actually kept. So I think there's one building there, which looks remarkably like this. And then there's a new building there. I think it's actually like two buildings built. Although that's brick. And that appears to be rammed earth. Let me just go back here. The first building doesn't say what it's made of. Oh, wait a minute. Half-timbered or brick between posts was the major form of construction in the city. Usually the walls were given some protective covering of stucco or exterior boarding, but the fact that the timbered walls of the Ursuline convent was left exposed is confirmed by a drawing from 1737. However, such construction was shown to be inappropriate for the humid climate of New Orleans, with significant deterioration already apparent by 1745, in addition to being a fire hazard. Alright, so apparently the first building was not very well built for the conditions, given how humid the place is. So it was brick between posts, so it's kind of timber posts with brick infill. Fascinating. Anyway, built of stucco-covered brick, the new building, also known as the Old Ursuline Convent, is typical for the French neoclassical architecture. It is a formal, symmetrical building, severely designed in its lack of ornamentation. No applied orders of pilasters or columns relieve the plain walls. Only the slightly arched windows set in shallow moldings, the rusticated coins at the corners, and narrow central pedimented pavilion break the even rhythm of the fenestration. Fenestration means windows. The broad plain-hipped roof, broken only by four small low-set dormers, contrasts well with the multi-windowed facade and completes the austere but not unpleasant finely proportioned building. Okay, stucco-covered brick. So now we're talking about this part, I'm pretty sure. Actually, this might be a third building. Let me just go to the second building, if I don't break my legs. Alright, the second building is here. Ooh, gardens and crops. Alright, cool. So I believe this is the second building. There's a lot of windows. There's a little bit of detailing in the corners. Slightly arched windows, as they say. Stucco covered brick? No, it's just plain brick. There's no stucco that I can see. I guess it's... No, it's just plain brick. Look at this. No, it's just brick. If it's stucco covered brick, then it should be a smooth wall because the stucco just goes over the brick. I don't know if this is accurate. But There we go, there's slope roofs, a lot of windows, etc. Actually, it's not quite the same as the picture, is it? Well, it's vaguely similar, but this is significantly more austere than the one in the game. For one, the windows are smaller. Unless it's not the same building. Like, I mean, they have pictures of this. Like, they have, maybe it's a different building. Maybe it's not even the same thing. But it can't be. This I don't understand. Like, they have a building, and then they copied it, but they made it different. Why? The ground floor was used largely for the dormitory, classrooms, refectory, which is like the dining hall, and infirmary of the orphanage, maintained by the nuns. The second floor contains cells for the nuns, a library, infirmary, and storerooms. The winding stairway is believed to be from the original convent installed in the new building. Details: this is the finest surviving example of French colonial public architecture in the country, states the National Park Service. It is by some accounts the oldest structure in New Orleans, the oldest surviving structure in New Orleans, built between 1748 and 1752, being at least 15 years older than the Lafitte's blacksmith shop. It was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1960. The convent and its associated school, Ursuline Academy, moved downriver to a site on Delphin Street. In the Ninth Ward in 1824. In 1912, the convent moved uptown to State Street. Later additions to the building: the entrance portico was added by the bishop, who also constructed the gatehouse around 1825 to 30. So the portico should not be here, and reoriented the building, which originally faced the river, to have the main entrance on what had been the backside, Chartres Street. Oh, that's interesting. So they turned the building around. The front door used to be on the other side. The Ursuline property covered 2 city squares extending to Royal Street. An old ground plan shows a chapel at the corner of Ursulines and Decatur Streets, dedicated to Our Lady of Victory. Near the entrance to the grounds along the levee were also a reception house for visitors, the day school, and a residence for the chaplain. Between these buildings and the convent were gardens. To the right, moving up from the riverside entrance, were the hospital buildings, and beyond them the military barracks. It seems like the actual thing is much bigger than what we see in the game. There's a lot of stuff described here, and I don't think they can all fit into the size of the building we see here. Despite great interior alterations and decay, the convent is considered one of the most important historical and religious monuments in the United States, and it's one of the few remaining physical links with the French capital in Louisiana. Yeah, so most of the French architecture was destroyed in the fire, right? But this one survived. On the third building, in 1824, the nuns moved to a new, larger convent in the city's Ninth Ward, and the present structure was turned over to the Bishop of New Orleans as a residence, and for a while came to be called the Archbishop's Palace. After 1899, it continued in use as offices for the Archdiocese, and still later as a rectory for the adjacent St. Mary's Church. There's a church? I don't see an adjacent church, but okay. So this portico was added in 1800s. Oh look, nuns! There's actual nuns, because this is a convent, and there are nuns. Amazing. They made nuns and put them in the game. The front door used to be on this side, apparently. But there's all sorts of junk piled up on the street. So this used to be the front door, which is not that impressive, I guess. I kind of want to see how big it is in real life and compare it with the game. I'm not sure if this is the right scale. In fact, I'm fairly sure it's not the right scale. Let me come here and Old Ursuline Convent. Look at that. Look at that. That's the building there. But there's Okay, so the city square, or the block, is that big, and the convent only takes up like half of it. There's like buildings on the other half, so there's no street. So in the game, the street is like there, which doesn't make any sense. And the garden's there. There's a gatehouse, which we don't have in the game. A car, hold on, a car is that big. So that means we can fit like one. Hold on, how big is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We can fit like 8 or 9 cars along the length of that face, right? There's no. Hold on, there's no gatehouse. Oh well, I mean, it's kind of a gatehouse, but it's not the right shape. It's kind of too small. 9 cars. Or 8. Let's see, a car would be like that, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-ish. It actually seems to be full size, or at least not much smaller. I think the building itself is full size. The city is shrunk down by at least 50% because, you know, a city square is, or a city block is like from this street to the other street. But as we saw in the real map, there should be like another garden here, and then more buildings, and then the city block. So I think the convent itself is actually full scale, but not entirely accurately recreated. But the city is, of course, much smaller than it should be. But then if this is the full size, why are the windows the wrong size? And why is the roof not the right slope? I guess they made the roof slope less so that we can climb on it, because I think this is actually too steep for people to climb on in the game if they made it that steep. Still, it seems really weird to me because they kind of recreated it, but they didn't just use the same design, they made it different. Let me just look at that again. Yeah, the windows are... Look at this. There's like gap, window, and then gap. Whereas there's like the windows are at the eaves, and then there's not much of a gap, and then there's... Yeah, alright, well the windows are too big, basically. Alright, so that's the convent. One of the few surviving buildings from the French period. Alright, I guess we'll move on. Database, locations, New Orleans. The Plaza de Armas, or Place d'Armes, or the basically it's the plaza of the army. I guess we should just go to... What's the square called again? Hold on. It is Jackson Square. Alright, let's go to Jackson Square. New Orleans. So, let me just run over there and have a look, although we've seen it several times already. At the moment there seems to be like an army camped out at Jackson Square. And that's probably what it was used for, you know, back during the time of the French and the Spanish rule. Where are we going? Where are we going? There, okay, here we go. So there's the church, which is not accurate. I mean, they put all the old buildings in, but they kind of took liberties with them and they didn't recreate them accurately. I wonder why. It's not difficult to find descriptions and images of the old buildings. Anyway, here's the Jackson Square. So Jackson Square is a historic park in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana, and blah blah blah, National Historic Landmark, etc. etc. Design. Jackson Square was designed after the famous 17th century Place de Vogue. I can't French. Vosges. How do you pronounce that in French? Vosges? Vosges? I don't know. When is an S silent? Anyway, it was designed after that place in Paris, France, by the architect and landscape architect Louis H. Pillier? Is it Pillier? Jackson Square is roughly the size of a city block. Sculptor Mills' statue of the Battle of New Orleans hero and US President Andrew Jackson, for whom the square was named in 1815, was erected in 1856. Iron fences, walkways, benches, and Parisian-style landscaping remain intact from the original design by Michaela Almonesta, Baroness de Pontelba, in 1851. She also built the Pontelba buildings which flank the square. Alright, so whatever it is we see in the game is not like what we have in real life, because this was redesigned in the 1800s. Although there's like a fountain there, right? And then like a statue there, or a building. Alright, let's go to history. Early French colonial New Orleans was originally centered on what was then called the Place d'Armes, literally Weapon Square. After the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, the Place d'Armes was renamed Jackson Square after the victorious United States General Andrew Jackson. In the center of the park stands an equestrian statue of Jackson erected in 1856, one of 4 identical statues in the United States by the sculptor Clark Mills. Wait a minute, he made 4 identical statues? That's kind of cheap. I mean, you make the mold and then you cast the statue, but he made 4 identical ones. What? Anyway, so there's not much information about what it was like back when it was under French control. Weapons Square, but it was the center of French colonial New Orleans. Now, the square originally overlooked the Mississippi River across Decatur Street, but the view was blocked in the 19th century by the building of taller levees. The riverfront was long devoted to shipping docks. The 20th century administration of Mayor Moon Landrieu installed a scenic boardwalk on top of the levee to reconnect the city to the river. It is known as the Moonwalk in his honor. But that is 20th century. On the north side of the square there are 3 18th century historic buildings which were the city's heart in the colonial era. North side. The center of the 3 is St. Louis Cathedral. We've seen that. The cathedral was designed as a minor basilica, etc., etc. To the cathedral's right is the presbytery, built to match the cabildo. Wait a minute. To the left of the cabildo, the old city hall, now a museum, where the final version of the Louisiana Purchase was signed. So there's a city hall, and then the presbytery. The presbytery originally housed the city's Roman Catholic priests and authorities. At the start of the 19th century, it was adapted as the city hall, and in the 20th century it became a museum. I don't think those are in the game at all. Pretty sure those are not in the game. No, there's no special buildings on either side. Is there anything else we want to see? Reconstruction era. The Place d'Armes served as an arsenal. During the insurrection following the disputed 1872 gubernatorial election, in March 1873, it was the site of the Battle of Jackson Square. A several thousand-man militia under John McEnery, the Democratic claimant to the office of governor, defeated the New Orleans militia, seizing control of the state's buildings and armory for a few days. They retreated before the arrival of federal forces, which re-established control temporarily in the state. Alright, well. So there's not much information about the original place, but it is completely redesigned now. Art, we don't really need to know, but there's jugglers and magicians and street performers in the square today. Contemporary festivals and events. Live music is a regular feature of the square. I'm not going to read the rest of this, but if you want to go visit there today, apparently it's quite lively and interesting. Alright, so again, not any information historically about the French or Spanish colonial period of the time. Okay, what's the next landmark? So they just kept all the weapons in the square, really? I guess they did. I mean, there's... According to the name, they kept all the weapons here. There's some cannons there, right? So the next thing we want to look at, what is this? Database and locations. New Orleans. St. Peter's Cemetery. Okay, we were there before. Not gonna go back there again, it's just kind of a bunch of graves. Let me see if there's anything here. St. Peter's Cemetery. Did I spell that wrong? I think I spelled that wrong. St. Peter's Cemetery. In this Arkansas, Maine, Arkansas, Stanton Island. No, New Orleans? St. Peter's Cemetery, New Orleans? List of cemeteries. That's awkward. St. Peter's Cemetery Reserve in LA. Nope. New Iberia. Nope. St. Louis. Nope. This is awkward. St. Peter's Cemetery. No, this is somewhere else. We're not in New Orleans anymore. We're in New York. Okay, well, that's awkward. So it doesn't seem like we can find it in the game. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not there anymore. Maybe it's just. Can I just go cemetery? St. Louis Cemetery number 1. French Quarter Phantom, Cemetery Tour Ghost, funny. St. Louis Cemetery number 1, maybe it's this one. Maybe it's this one? Or... Oh, wait a minute. Huh. It might be this one. What is this? What is this place? New Orleans. Is this a thing? Can I type this into Maryland? No. Roman Catholic Archdiocese of St. Louis. New Orleans. Operates 17 cemeteries in the region. What is this? No, I don't think we can find this. I don't know what. St. Louis, nope. 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 Cemeteries. Let's see. Which one are we looking for? St. Peter's. Maybe? Okay, well, whatever it is, there's not much for us to read about, apparently. I think it's this one. I think it's this one. No, alright, well, nothing useful for us to look for, unfortunately. And there's no... Yeah, I think it might be that. Although you can, I mean, if you just kind of count the number of graves there, though, obviously it's much bigger than the cemetery we see in the game. All right, let's move on. Let us move on. Congo Square. Congo Square. Louis Armstrong Park. Alright. Congo Square is a thing that we can look for. Congo Square is an open space within Louis Armstrong Park, which is located in the Treme neighborhood of New Orleans, Louisiana, just across Rampart Street north of the French Quarter. So if we zoom out, Louis Armstrong Park is there, or Congo Square is here. Right there, Congo Square. Interesting paving, look at that. That is, alright, well, there's Congo Square, it is just to the north. Alright, so according to the map, it is actually outside the French Quarter. Just outside the French Quarter. But according to the game, it's kind of inside the French Quarter, which is a bit weird. Might as well go over there. So, if we navigate in the game, so it should be just to the north here. Let me just grab that. Nobody really cares when I rip off these posters. Alright, so where is this place? That is... that's the cemetery. And the square should be right here. This is Congo Square according to the game. I think it's a slave market, isn't it? Alright, so Congo Square. It's famous for its history of African American music. Alright, the Louisiana's French and Spanish colonial era of 18th century. In Louisiana's French and Spanish colonial era of the 18th century, slaves were commonly allowed Sundays off from their work. They were allowed to gather in the Place des Nègres, Place Publique, later Circus Square, or informally Place Congo, at the back of town. Okay, I see. So when the slaves were allowed to rest on Sundays, they gathered here, where the slaves would set up a market, sing, dance, and play music. Alright, well they get Sundays off. It's not too bad. I guess they have to, otherwise they would die from overwork. But they get to hang out on Sunday. The tradition continued after the city became a part of the United States with the Louisiana Purchase. As African music had been suppressed in the Protestant colonies and states, the weekly gatherings at Congo Square became a famous sight for visitors from elsewhere in the United States. In addition, because of the immigration of refugees, some bringing slaves from the Haitian Revolution, New Orleans received thousands of additional Africans and Creoles in the early years of the 19th century. They reinforced African traditions in the city in music as in other areas. Many visitors were amazed at the African-style dancing and music. Observers heard the beat of the bambulas and wail of the banzas, and saw the multitude of African dancers that had survived through the years. Alright, so this is where African culture was maintained. What are these instruments of Creole music? Blah 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 blah. Nope. The banjo. Alright, banjo. Townsfolk would gather around the square on Sunday afternoons to watch the dancing. In 1819, the architect Benjamin Latrobe, a visitor to the city, wrote about the celebrations in his journal. Although he found them savage, he was amazed at the sight of 500 to 600 unsupervised slaves who assembled for dancing. He describes them as ornamented with a number of tails of the smaller wild beasts, with fringes, ribbons, little bells, and shells and balls, jingling and flirting about the performer's legs and arms. The women, one onlooker reported, wore, each according to her means, the newest fashions in silk, gauze, muslin, and percale dresses. The males covered themselves in Oriental and Indian dress and covered themselves only with a sash of the same sort wrapped around the body. Except for that, they were naked. Alright, so they're basically black people dancing. He found them savage, he was amazed at the sight of 500 to 600 unsupervised slaves who assembled for dancing. So I mean, I don't know just how repressive the slavery was, but at least on Sundays, they were let out and they kind of were allowed to be people. In a way, that makes more sense, because because people need entertainment, even if they're slaves, they need entertainment of some sort. Otherwise, it just like the more you try to repress people, the more they would kind of push back at you. So if you don't let them be people, if you don't let them kind of wind down at least once in a while, then they just become more and more difficult to manage. Anyway, let's just continue. I'm just kind of thinking, under what conditions might slavery work? Anyway, there's no point. I mean, there's no point to it. Just why have slaves? Just pay them a wage. One witness noted that clusters of onlookers, musicians, and dancers represented tribal groupings, with each nation taking their place in different parts of the square. The musicians used a range of instruments from available cultures: drums, gourds, banjo-like instruments, and quill pipes made from reeds strung together like pan flutes, as well as marimbas and European instruments such as the violin, tambourines, and triangles. So there were actual, like, there were kind of cultures within the gatherings. White Creole composer Louis Moreau Gottschalk incorporated rhythms and tunes he heard in Congo Square into some of his compositions, like his famous Bambuila what's OP again? Opera? Is that opera number? What does OP stand for? I should know this. Anyway, never mind. So, as usual, white people stealing black music and making money of it. As harsher United States practices of slavery replaced the more lenient French colonial style, the slave gatherings declined. Although no recorded date of the last slave dances in the square exists, the practice seems to have stopped more than a decade before the end of slavery with the American Civil War. Alright, so the French style of slavery was somewhat more lenient than the American style. So, interesting. And before, when we were reading about the history of New Orleans, we heard about, there were the whites, and then the free blacks, and then the black slaves. So the French tradition is somewhat more lenient than the American tradition. Like later on, when they kind of reimposed segregation, it became, extremely repressive. And it sounds like under the French influence, it wasn't quite as bad. Although, slavery is slavery, so. In the late 19th century, the square again became a famous musical venue, this time for a series of brass band concerts by orchestras of the area's Creole of color community. Towards the end of the century, the city of New Orleans officially renamed the square as Beauregard Square in honor of Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard. While this name appeared on some maps, most locals continued to call it Congo Square. Are you kidding me? They tried to rename it after a Confederate general. But nobody cared, they kept calling it Congo Square. In 2011, the New Orleans City Council officially voted to restore the traditional name Congo Square. Yeah, nobody cares about your Confederacy, bro. In the 1920s, New Orleans Municipal Auditorium was built in an area just in the back of the square, displacing and disrupting some of the Tremere community. In the 1960s, a controversial urban renewal project leveled a substantial portion of the Tremere neighborhood around the square. Like, again, you see this, so-called urban renewal kind of just trying to demolish the black people out of all the cool places. Like this kind of legal or quasi-legal conflict between the white people who are trying to suppress black culture and the black people who live there. After a decade of debate over the land, the city turned it into Louis Armstrong Park, which incorporates Old Congo Square. Starting in the 1970s, the city organized the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival and held events annually at Congo Square. As attendance grew, the city moved the festival to the much larger New Orleans Fairgrounds. In the late 20th century and early 21st century, Congo Square has continued to be an important venue for music festivals and a community gathering place for brass band parades, protest marches, and drum circles. Alright, so it continues to be somewhat interesting. It's just like you read this, and it's just why try to stop people playing music in a square? Like, who cares? Anyway, so there's music. I don't really need to read about in music. Alright, so it's culturally significant area. Although if you just look at the picture, there's no one there. Look at this, there's no one there. Like, somebody took this picture of Congo Square and there's literally no one there. Why do they do this? Like, they hate black people, so they just push them out. And they shut things down and they urban renew them out of the city. And now it's just a dead space. Whereas there used to be lively music every Sunday. Why do that? Why the hate just kills everything fun? Why? I don't know. Anyway, well, let's continue. So this is Congo Square. Supposedly every Sunday there's music. I wish they put that in the game. Imagine if there's like dancers and drummers here. That would make more sense. I wish they did, because you know, like you know how I talked earlier about. I mean, the game like bases the story and the missions. They're based on history. And yet, having played through the game, you don't get a sense of the culture, and you don't get a sense of life in 1777 in New Orleans. I mean, if you have a bunch of blacks, kind of slaves, dressed in fancy clothes and dancing and singing here, that would really convey the culture, right? And you know, but here they just kind of sit. There's a white person just sitting there, and they're not doing anything, and so. Like, the physical Congo Square is here, but the cultural Congo Square is not here. You know what I mean? They're just standing around doing nothing. It's kinda, I don't know, it's not interesting. They're supposed to be slaves, for one. I mean, they're not working, and they're not dancing, so what are they doing just standing around? Anyway, let's continue. Database, locations, New Orleans. Governor's Mansion? Is that a thing that we can look up? Governor's Mansion, New Orleans. Governor's Mansion, New Orleans. Louisiana Governor's Mansion. That's not what I want, is it? It's in Baton Rouge. No. This is Old Louisiana Governor's Mansion. No, that's not the right place neither. New Jersey, nope. Louisiana gubernatorial election. List of museums in Louisiana. New Orleans, nope. I don't think we can find it in the game. Hold on. Where is this? Governor's Mansion. Is that the plantation, or is that somewhere else? I don't recognize this at all. Let me just check the map. So is the Governor's Mansion this thing? Oh, it might be. But it's outside the city. Oh, is it this thing? No, it's this thing, isn't it? Wait a minute, it's next to the square. Hold on, what's going on here? Oops, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to be parkouring. Get back on the ground. Get back on the ground. Nope. Alright, get back on the ground. Get back. I'm good. So it should be over here somewhere, if I can find out how to get there. The thing is, you know, a number of white people have made a lot of money from stealing black music and then selling it. So I mean, if you're gonna get rid of all the black people from Congo Square, then where are you gonna steal their music from now? You know what I mean? It's like, alright, so you're racist and you hate them and you just want them to shut up. But you're making money off their music. And if you just get rid of them, then you can't steal any more of their music. Alright, let's continue. Isn't that how it works? Okay, I think this is the governor's. Okay, this is the governor's mansion. Can I find a box? Let me find a box and walk inside. Hey guys, thanks. So this apparently is the governor's mansion in New Orleans. But did we ever have a mission in here? Maybe we did and I don't remember. There's a really suspicious guy sitting there. But in real life, it's not that. What is this? What is that? What is 1850 house, Louisiana Visitor Information Center, Creole delicacies, Tabasco country. No, there's no mention. Nothing. Nope. No. Alright, so we don't. No. Nothing of the sort. Alright, well, there's not nothing we can look at. Next. Database. New Orleans. Plantation. The plantation is just a generic plantation, right? The plantation is just outside the city to the east. Should we look up I mean, we can look up slavery in America. But that's gonna be a big long article, and I don't really want to get into that. I just want to stick with the architecture. Plantation? Can we like find a plantation, slavery and para-slavery? Plantation economy and slavery. Plantation economy in the southern colonies. In North American colonies, plantations were mainly concentrated in the South. These colonies included Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. These colonies had good soil and almost all year-round growing seasons, ideal for crops such as rice and tobacco. Existence of many waterways in the region furthermore made transportation easier. Each colony specialized in one or two crops and animals, with Virginia standing out in tobacco production. Plantation owners embraced the use of slaves mainly because the indentured labor became expensive. Some indentured servants were also leaving to start their own farms as land was widely available. Colonists tried to use Native Americans for labor, but they were susceptible to European diseases and died in large numbers. That is terrible. The plantation owners then turned to enslaved Africans for labor. In 1665, there were less than 500 Africans in Virginia, but by 1750, 100 years later, 85% of the 235,000 slaves lived in the southern colonies, Virginia included. Africans made up 50% of the South's population. 50% of the population were African slaves. 50%. How do you keep that many people in line? How do you keep that many people in line? According to 1840 United States Census, 1 out of every 4 families in Virginia owned slaves. Oh, interesting. 1 out of every 4 families owned slaves. So it wasn't even the majority. Although, of course, some people who own slaves owned a lot of slaves. There were over 100 plantation owners who owned over 100 slaves. Alright. Number of slaves in the lower south, 2.3 million. Number of slaves in the upper south, 1.2 million. Number of slaves in border states, 0.4 million. Fewer than 1/3 of southern families owned slaves at the peak of slavery, prior to the Civil War. In Mississippi and South Carolina, the figure approached 1/2. The total number of slaves owners was almost 400,000, amounting to approximately 3.8% of the southern and border states' population. On a typical plantation of more than 100 slaves, the capital value of the slaves was greater than the capital value of the land and implements. Large presence of slaves in the colonies was due to the Atlantic slave trade. Alright, I don't know if I should read much more. Industrial Revolution in Europe. Sugar plantation, indigo plantations. Anyway, so that's plantation economy. Let's not go into too much more detail about that. Nothing about the architecture. The Grand Prix Mansion, I believe this is completely fictional. Let me try and look up the name. The Grand Prix? Louis-Philippe de Grand Prix? Nope, this is somebody else. Redirected. Nope. That's the only person. Alright, so we don't have... I don't think these are real people. The Grand Place Warehouse. No, these are not real things. Slave Traders Holding Area. That's not entirely useful neither, but where is it in the game? Is it that thing in the upper right? Madame John's Legacy. What is this? What does that even mean? Madame John's Legacy is a real thing? It's actually called that? Wow, it's actually called Madame John's Legacy. In the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. Alright, let me just try and find it here. Madame John's Legacy is there. Okay, we can find this one at least. Alright, where's the map? Oh, it's there. It's right there. We need to avoid the guards on our way out, otherwise we're gonna get attacked, I believe. Unless I find my box. Where's my box? I dropped the box back here. Alright, let me just pick up the box so I don't get attacked on the way out. I run slower while carrying the box, though. Hey guys, I'm a slave. Not carry your own box, fools. Alright, so the building is this one. And it has an interior. Look at this. There's an interior, there's a bench here for some reason. There's ramps going up either side. The back looks pretty much the same as the front. And the ramps, no, don't do that. The ramps come up here. Okay, let me just go back to the street. So, Madame John's Legacy is a house in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. The name is taken from a story by George Washington Cable. The house was built in 1788. Built in 1788, it should not be in the game because the game is 1777. After a fire destroyed much of the neighborhood, the house was rebuilt in the older French colonial style rather than the current Spanish style. So I guess that's why they put that in the game, because again, it's one of the few buildings that's in the old French style. Everything else being destroyed by fire and then rebuilt in the Spanish style. The house is briefly seen in the 1994 movie Interview with a Vampire. I don't know why that's important. It was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1970. The site was restored at a cost of something. That's not really important though. Why is this important? It doesn't really say anything. I mean, there's the Louisiana State Museum. Can we read the plaques? Like, what does that say? Residence of Don Manuel Lanzos, captain of the Spanish Army. Alright. Built in 1788, restored in 1998. Okay. So, birthplace of Renato Bellucci? Renato Bellucci? A lieutenant of Jean Lafitte's, but I can't read that. Who participated in the Battle of New Orleans, later admiral to the Venezuelan Navy. Okay, so it's a house of famous people. This is not useful. Okay, well this is like one of the few buildings in the French style. And I guess that ends our architecture tour of New Orleans for this game. Don't think there's too much else for us to look at. Let me just check the other locations. So there's the Bayou. Fort St. Jean. Should we look that up? Agate's Hut is fictional. Smuggler's Hut is fictional. Fort St. Jean? What if I go to Wikipedia? Fort St. Did I spell that wrong? Maybe I did. Fort St. John may refer to Versailles or Quebec. No. Nope. Did I St. Juan del Bayou? Okay, let's try St. Juan del Bayou. Okay, we can find it by the Spanish name. The Spanish fort, also known as Old Spanish Fort, Fort St. John and Fort St. John, is a historic place in New Orleans, formerly the site of a fort and later an amusement park. Are you serious? An amusement park? So the existing fort is only the ruins. The fort is not there anymore. Let's see, prehistory archaeological investigations have discovered that the fort location was the site of the pre-Columbian Marksville culture, dating back to circa 300 CE, with continued occupation afterwards. A large shell midden was used as the base under the early colonial fort. Okay. The colonial era fort protected the Lake Pontchartrain. Can we find the pronunciation of this word? Pontchartrain? Pontchartrain? Lake Pontchartrain, it's French, alright. Entrance of Bayou Streets, or of Bayou St. John. The first small fort here was erected by the French in 1701 before the founding of the city of New Orleans to protect the important trade route along Bayou St. John. After Louisiana passed to Spanish control, a large brick fort was constructed at the site of the neglected old French fortification. This was known as St. Jean del Bayou. Louisiana passed back to France and then to the hands of the United States. The fort was decommissioned in 1823. From fort to amusement park. The land was bought by private developers and became a popular amusement park, known as Spanish Fort or Old Spanish Fort. It features restaurants, a casino, a resort hotel, dancing pavilions, and alligator pond. They played with alligators. And in its later decades, amusement rides such as the Scenic Railway, a roller coaster, a steam railway, and later an electric streetcar system connected the lakeside resort with the center of the city. It was especially popular during the summer for the cooling breezes of the lake. It was built as the Coney Island of the South. Wow. Restaurants, a casino, a resort hotel, dancing pavilions, an alligator pond, amusement rides, roller coaster, and then railway. Cool. From about 1880s to the 1908, the small iron submarine now in the collection of the Louisiana State Museum was on display here. Identified as the Confederate war submarine Pioneer, recent investigations have called the traditional identification into question, making the curious early submarine even more of a mystery. Over the Rhine, a German restaurant and beer garden was a popular attraction, as were dances by Pauletti's orchestra. Trenchina's restaurants and Brown's ice cream parlor were often featured live bands. The park had 2 cabarets, Tokyo Gardens and the Frolics. This sounds awesome! In the park's later decades, a number of early jazz bands played here. Armand J. Piron's New Orleans Orchestra was a regular, etc., etc. Alright. I don't think we need to read much of that, except to know that the fort does not exist anymore. Let me just go to Wikimedia Commons and see what pictures we have. Oh look, we have like restaurants. Some stuff exists. Let me just concert hall, Confederate submarine. Wow, look at this stuff. Look at all these photos. Look at all these amazing old photos. Look at this stuff. And then there's like an aerial photo as well. And there's like bits and pieces of the old fort remaining. There's a penny arcade. Okay, so a lot of white people. Let's see, are there any black people? Is that a black person? Almost all white people, alright. It's afternoon, Reno's restaurant. This is a postcard from the Spanish fort, so this is the old cannon emplacements. It's not much of a fort, is it? It's not that tall. It's more like a... What should we call it? It's not a very formidable fort. Let's see, there's a concert hall and garden Spanish fort. There's the concert hall, there's the garden. Amazing! It turned into a massive theme park. Oh, no, not really a theme park, but like an amusement park. The Old Fort Casino, Canal and Pavilion. Amazing. The Puzzle, Old Wall and House. View of the gardens. And then here's the aerial photo of the place. Fascinating. Look at all these docks. And there's a river. The bayou doesn't look anything like the bayou in game, by the way. Alright, fascinating. Okay, what other things do we have? Chichen Itza? I don't think we're not gonna look at Chichen Itza. You can go look that up in Wikipedia if you want. And General Taylor? No, that's not important. Alright, so that ends our architecture tour of Assassin's Creed Liberation. I mean, they put a few things in the game, and a lot of it is not that accurate. But it's kind of there. It's mostly there, kind of there. Alright. So I believe that ends up our playthrough of this game. The next game the next Assassin's Creed game that we're gonna play is Black Flag, Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. I don't plan to buy Assassin's Creed Unity anytime soon. I might buy it when it's like $20 or $30 at most. There's also Assassin's Creed Rogue, which apparently is much better. but I don't plan to buy those anytime soon. So maybe by the time I upload this, I would have bought it. I don't know. But alright, next game is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which I hear is really good. I'll see you guys there.